Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into one of the most potent and, I think, enduring American novels of the 20th century, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath.
Right, and for so many readers, this book is intensely personal. It's seen as this raw account of one woman's descent into mental illness.
It is, but for us, it offers something much wider, a really valuable systemic critique.
And our mission today is, well, it's ambitious. We aren't here for biographical gossip or just a traditional literary breakdown. We want to use the experience of Esther Greenwood, the novel's protagonist, as a kind of high-resolution system diagnosis.
A diagnosis of what, exactly?
Well, the core question we're exploring is this. How do confining social, educational, and medical systems, specifically the ones targeting ambitious, intellectually gifted women in mid-century America, how do they force an individual toward a complete crisis of identity?
A crisis that results in paralysis and ultimately a mental breakdown. And that's the crux of it, really. I mean, while the novel is so rigidly fixed in the repressive climate of the 1950s, the tension Esther experiences is still so familiar.
How so?
That pull between demanding professional pathways, the restrictive gender expectations from society, and then that desperate search for meaningful mental health care. It remains profoundly central to understanding modern challenges.
Things like burnout, the failures in our current care models.
Precisely. It's a blueprint for disconnection and despair, all seen through that one unforgettable metaphor.
The bell jar.
The bell jar. And our analysis is going to be strictly systems level. We're going to look impartially at the mechanism of Esther's descent.
So not who is to blame, but why it happens.
Exactly. We'll explore how institutional pressures like the need to get married, the academic gatekeeping, the flawed and punitive psychiatric models, how all of that produced her despair. We want to analyze why these outcomes occur, not who is individually to blame for her suffering.
Yeah.
So to really understand the power of the novel, I think we have to start with the author, Sylvia Plath.
Right. Her own context is just so deeply woven into the book's reception.
Inescapably so. She died tragically young, at age 30, on February 11, 1963. And this was just weeks after The Bell Jar was published in the UK.
And that untimely death, it just instantly and irrevocably tied her life and her legacy directly to the novel. It solidified her status as a feminist heroine, a martyr, really, years before the book was even widely appreciated in the United States.
It meant that every reader after that point approached the novel with this grim knowledge of its author's fate.
Yeah.
It changes how you read it.
And Plath herself was famously just enormously ambitious. That really defined her character.
Oh, absolutely. It drove her entire professional life. We know she initially concentrated on poetry, and she had significant success with the Colossus in 1962. But she had plans that went way beyond verse.
She wanted to write novel after novel.
She did. She aimed to break into mainstream literary success, dreaming of publishing her work in what she called the slicks.
Which were the big commercial magazines, right? Like McCall's or the Ladies' Home Journal.
Exactly. She wanted commercial reach, broad cultural impact. It wasn't just about elite literary acclaim for her.
And the creation of the Bell Jar was tied up in that struggle for legitimacy and, frankly, for financial stability.
Very much so. She wrote the novel under a prestigious grant, the Eugene F. Saxton Fellowship, which is ironic because that same fellowship had actually rejected her poetry manuscript earlier.
So it must have been a huge vindication for her when they accepted the novel project.
I think so. Even if it was a form she sometimes felt was beneath her, she knew it was necessary to get that mainstream success.
But the novel's initial reception was, well, it was complicated and painful for her.
It was. When the manuscript first got to Harper and Row, two older editors, both steeped in the poetry world, they found it disappointing, juvenile, and overwrought. They essentially rejected it.
They just weren't prepared for its honesty, were they? Its raw, satirical bite at the very institutions they represented.
Not at all. And that rejection was compounded by Plath's own fears about the book's content.
Because it was a romaniclef. It mirrored her own life so closely.
Right. So she insisted it shouldn't be published in the U.S. at first. She was worried that thinly disguised characters would be hurtful to her family and their friends.
Which tells you so much about the culture of shame and repression in the 1950s. The subject of the book itself was too scandalous to be discussed openly.
So as a result, it was published in London in January 1963 under a pseudonym.
Victoria Lucas.
Victoria Lucas. And even then, the reviews were lukewarm. They'd say things like, she can certainly write, but also that if she can learn to shape as well as she imagines, she may write an extremely good book.
Ouch, framing her brilliance as undisciplined.
Plath was reportedly deeply stung by that. But the most crucial context for our analysis comes from her own stated intent, which her mother later confirmed.
What was that?
Plath saw the book partly as a potboiler, really, a commercial thing. But her main intention was much more serious. She wanted to show how isolated a person feels when he is suffering a breakdown.
And she saw that isolation through what she called the distorting lens of a bell jar.
And that tells us two key things. First, the core subject is isolation, a separation from society and from reality itself.
And
Second, the bell jar is the systemic mechanism that creates that distortion. It doesn't just isolate Esther, it warps her reality, making the world seem profoundly wrong, unnatural, and suffocating.
a suffocating feeling that's driven by the novel's specific cultural moment. The story contrasts the superficial and artificial world of New York Magazine internships
With the oppressive, silent environment of the dead summer world of a suburb of Boston, that sharp geographical and social shift is the catalyst for her breakdown.
So she arrives in New York, supposedly at the peak of her achievement.
Right, she's won this prestigious magazine contest, and yet she feels this profound, almost cosmic detachment. She knows she's supposed to be the envy of thousands of other college girls.
But inside, she feels very still and very empty, the way the eye of a tornado must feel.
Yes, moving dully along in the middle of the surrounding hullabaloo. That external expectation of joy creates this intense internal pressure, where her own apathy feels like a criminal failure.
So if we had to boil it down, the central thesis would be something like this. The pressure cooker of 1950s American society, which demands hyperachievement and rigid domestic conformity at the same time, forces an ambitious woman into an existential crisis.
And that crisis leads directly to the crushing sense of isolation symbolized by the bell jar. It's the system creating the symptom.
Okay, so let's unpack the core mechanisms of this crisis, and we have to start with the novel's most famous metaphor.
The fig tree. It's impossible to talk about this book without it. It just perfectly captures that feeling of systemic paralysis.
So the metaphor is all about the overwhelming and ultimately paralyzing nature of choice that the system imposes on Esther.
Exactly. She imagines her life branching out before her, and from the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a different future beckons.
And she lists them, right? The details are so specific.
They are, and it's important. It shows the full range of paths that were considered available to a smart, privileged woman at that time. One fig is a husband and children.
Another is a famous poet.
Another is being JC, the ambitious editor she works for. Then there are exotic lovers, a life of travel, or something totally different like being an Olympic champion.
But the systemic constraint here is that the culture was designed to make you choose just one, and only one.
And especially the career path and the domestic path were seen as totally mutually exclusive. Esther says it herself, "I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the others."
And this is where it all crystallizes. The inability to reconcile these conflicting, socially approved identities leads directly to her paralysis.
She describes herself just sitting there, frozen in the crotch of the tree, unable to move. She's starving to death as all the beautiful figs wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plop to the ground.
So the failure isn't personal. It's not procrastination.
No, it's the result of impossible societal demands that insist you can't be a whole person. You have to truncate yourself to fit into a box.
That paralysis brings us to the second core idea, which is about the moral landscape of her world, the commodification of purity and innocence.
Right. For Esther, the entire world is just split into this rigid binary. You have people who had slept with somebody and people who hadn't.
And she believes this is the only really significant difference between one person and another.
This systemic division places this immense, crippling value on female virginity. It operates as a commodity, a currency for the marriage market. It's how you buy respectability.
And the novel just meticulously exposes this as a destructive lie through Buddy Willard.
Through the devastating discovery of Buddy Willard's hypocrisy.
Yes, he's the golden boy, the medical student. He spent years building this image of himself as pure, saving himself for marriage.
And then Esther discovers he'd been having a long-term affair with a waitress, and she just feels this monumental betrayal. She realizes he had been pretending all this time to be so innocent, while setting the very standard she was supposed to uphold.
So the hypocrisy shatters her perception of the whole system.
Completely. If the rules don't apply to the men who enforce them, then the rules are just traps for women. The commodity she was protecting suddenly feels worthless, a burden.
She calls her virginity a millstone around my neck.
And here's the crucial move. Her response isn't to retreat. It's to intentionally destroy the commodity. She decides to discard her virginity with this cynical math professor, Irwin.
She approaches it like a transaction, an impersonal, almost administrative task she has to complete to gain her freedom.
It's a calculated move designed to free her from the moral rules that she now sees as the cause of her paralysis.
Which moves us to the third insight, the unsparing critique of the illusion of domestic bliss.
Yes, particularly through two characters, Dodo Conway and Mrs. Willard.
Dodo Conway is the model of, what, mandated hyperfertility?
That's a good way to put it. She's Catholic, 7 children, running a huge household on this bizarre diet of Rice Krispies, peanut butter, and marshmallow sandwiches.
Esther sees that path as a potential solution, right? A simple, prescribed way out of her overwhelming choices.
She does, but she's also repulsed by it. She says plainly, "Children made me sick." The novel is very clear that this prescribed form of happiness is completely antithetical to her identity.
But the most chilling critique of domesticity comes from the trauma of birth.
Oh, absolutely. When she witnesses Mrs. Tomalillo in the delivery room, making that unhuman hooing noise, a noise of just pure animal agony.
And Esther is horrified. She concludes the drug they give women to make them forget the pain.
She concludes it must be just like the sort of drug a man would invent.
That line is maybe the most profound systemic indictment in the whole book.
I think so too. It suggests the entire institutional structure is set up to perpetuate female suffering by making women forget the pain so they'll just have another baby, trapping them.
Trapping them in what Esther calls a long, blind, doorless, and windowless corridor of pain.
And that experience directly shapes her view of marriage itself. She sees it not as a partnership, but as an act of erasure.
Like Mrs. Willard's hand-braided rug, a beautiful thing made with immense effort.
Only to be put on the floor to be soiled and dull. She realizes a husband secretly wanted for her to flatten out underneath his feet like Mrs. Willard's kitchen mat. Marriage in this system means the obliteration of a woman's identity.
Okay, our fourth core idea tracks this devastating cycle of achievement as deception and exhaustion.
Esther is the classic overachiever, the high-performing student who excelled by learning how to manipulate the system.
Like getting her class dean to let her swap chemistry for Shakespeare.
Exactly, a move she knew would benefit her, but which she achieved through artifice. She realized her academic success was based on a horrible effort of will, and her ability to get A's through performance, even in subjects she hated, like physics.
And the deception required is the key. The system rewarded that performance, which led to the scholarship, which then imposed even higher expectations.
And the consequence of this lifelong performance is this profound systemic exhaustion. She doesn't have one specific problem. She is simply depleted.
She becomes a dull cart horse who can only balk and balk.
Yes. When faced with the next required step, the New York internship, she's just done. She is tired of running after good marks and prizes and grants. It's not just a mood, it's a systematic depletion of her internal resources.
And the system offers no relief, only escalating demands, like her editor, J.C.
J.C. represents that merciless gatekeeping of the elite professional world. She doesn't just want competence, she demands endless specialization, 5 languages, an obscure thesis topic.
All just to stand above the hundreds of girls flooding New York.
It's a treadmill where the finish line just keeps moving further away, guaranteeing that you always feel inadequate and exhausted.
And finally, that leads us to the stifling of self-expression and voice.
Right. Esther, paralyzed by all these expectations, tries to write a novel. Elaine sat on the breezeway, but the words feel hollow and unoriginal.
She's so used to academic imitation that she thinks she must have read the lines somewhere else.
And this inability to create something authentic is contrasted so sharply with Hilda, the hatmaker.
The woman who might not even be able to read or write.
Yet she creates these startling hats out of bits of straw or fur. She achieves a pure, unmediated creativity that completely eludes Esther's over-intellectualized, paralyzed mind. Hilda is outside the academic system, and she's original.
So Esther's paralysis pushes her towards the sensational, the taboo.
Yes, she gets obsessed with the scandal sheet, reading about murders and suicides. And you have to ask, why is this content so compelling for her?
Because the high culture media she's supposed to consume, the poetry, the academic journals, they treat these harsh realities as if they didn't happen.
Exactly. The reality of death and suffering becomes the only readable content for her. It offers a morbid kind of authenticity that's denied by the polished, deceptive world she's supposed to want to be a part of.
This analysis leads us right into mapping the systems themselves, because the bell jar isn't just a psychological portrait, it's a structural critique.
Let's start with mid-century gender roles and their physical expression. The Hotel Amazon.
It's such a perfect architectural manifestation of societal control, isn't it?
It is. It's explicitly designed as a place where men couldn't get at them and deceive them. It isolates these young women while they wait to get married to some career man.
It's not a place for self-discovery, it's a holding cell.
A temporary one, reinforcing the idea that their ultimate value is tied to their marital potential.
And within that cell, the system incentivizes this competitive boredom.
That's a great way to put it. You have girls who are bored with yachts and bored with flying around in airplanes, and then you have Esther, who is so jealous I can't speak.
But both the privileged and the unprivileged are victims of the system's narrow definition of success.
Right. Their only acceptable long-term outcome is domesticity, which makes their current experiences, however luxurious, feel completely pointless.
And Esther's initial rebellion is to try to break the moral rules of the Amazon.
She tries to follow Doreen's decadent, rule-breaking path, drinking plain vodka until she feels powerful and godlike. But the moral code is so deeply ingrained, she can't sustain it.
And that's the key systemic failure. When she tries to return to the moral framework represented by the more innocent Betsy, she has to perform this ritual.
The ritual purification of the hot bath, she mentally dissolves everyone who tempted her. Doreen is dissolving, New York is dissolving, and none of them matter anymore.
She's trying to be very pure again. The escape requires this intense psychological effort, which just shows how strong the system's hold is.
Let's look next at the mechanisms of elite educational and professional gatekeeping. We mentioned how Esther succeeded by manipulating her class dean.
Proving that high performance, even if it's based on deception, is the only currency the system rewards.
But this relentless demand for upward mobility eventually collapses on itself. Esther has this moment of profound disillusionment when she finds out her mother's less prestigious college required basic courses she'd skipped in her honors program.
So her free ride came at a hidden cost. She traded fundamental knowledge for specialization.
A trade the system encouraged, but one that left her intellectually vulnerable and unbalanced.
And this professional system demands more than just performance. It demands the performance of happiness.
That scene with the magazine photographer is perfect. Show us how happy it makes you to write a poem. The system needs her to smile while she's sacrificing her psychological well-being.
She feels limp and betrayed, and when she looks in the mirror, her face looks bruised and puffy like she's peering from the grating of a prison cell.
The system demands this public performance of joyous achievement, which just masks the intense internal cost that's leading her straight into crisis.
And that crisis leads to institutional intervention, which brings us to the profound failure of initial psychiatric institutions.
When she first seeks help, she meets Dr. Gordon, the detached provider.
And the first thing she notices isn't his credentials, it's the family photo on his desk.
The beautiful wife, the children, the dog. It's all meant to signal his stability and his conformity to the exact domestic ideal the system demands of women. It's a superficial, reassuring image, not deep empathy.
A performative stability.
Exactly. And that detachment leads directly to the first shock treatment, the ECT, being presented not as therapy, but as a violent punishment.
She gets it with no warning, no explanation.
When her immediate reaction is so telling, I wondered what terrible thing it was that I had done. The experience is brutal. It confirms her feeling that the system is judging and punishing her for her deviation, not treating an illness.
And our sources show there was this stark institutional hierarchy of care. Belsize, Kaplan, and Weimark. They aren't just names.
No, they represent the stratification of access. Belsize, where Esther ends up, is the top tier, funded by patronage. Kaplan is the middle, and Weimark is the bottom.
A nurse describes Weimark by saying, over there they've got nothing. No OT, no walks.
And then the nurse says she's clearing out as soon as she collects enough durier to buy me a car.
That nurse's desperation reveals the core systemic flaw.
It does. The bottom tiers of the mental health system are defined by institutional poverty, employee burnout, and financial desperation. It ensures the most vulnerable patients get the worst, most harmful care, which just perpetuates the whole cycle.
Finally, let's map the feedback loops of contempt and isolation. The encounter with Marco, the woman hater.
That's such an acute example. His violence and aggression, pinning her down, calling her a slut.
Yeah.
It's fueled by his own rigid, unattainable romantic ideal. His cousin is becoming a nun.
And Esther recognizes the power dynamic immediately. She realizes woman-haters were like gods, invulnerable and chock full of power.
That's the systemic insight. They are powerful because their contempt stems from a twisted morality that women are designed to fail. Their contempt is protected by the social structure.
And that external contempt feeds her internal cycle of self-hatred.
Right. When she first tries to cut her wrist, she fails. And she realizes what she wanted to kill wasn't physical. It was something deeper, more secret, and a whole lot harder to get at.
She knows the illness is psychological, systemic, not just physical.
So her later act of cutting her leg is a deliberate act of self-punishment. Breaking the leg to pay myself back for being such a heel. She has internalized the system's judgment and is seeking physical penance for her perceived failure.
It's alarming how relevant the book's critique of institutional care and societal pressure still is. Let's talk about the present-day implications.
Starting with modern mental health and insurance systems, the novel shows that access to care is still profoundly hierarchical. It's conditional on privilege.
Absolutely. Esther's recovery is largely because of the quality of care she got from Dr. Nolan, but crucially, it was paid for by Philomena Guinea,
The wealthy novelist, her benefactor, who intervenes from the Bahamas, and her first question in the telegram is there a boy in the case?
which is so telling. But her financial backing is what gets Esther out of the failing public system and into Belsize, the top-tier institution.
And that gives her the possibility of real recovery. You see this need for privilege even in small details, like the $5 Esther pays for her birth control fitting, money that came from Guinea.
$5 seems trivial, but it signifies her ability to pay for her own freedom.
That's what separates her from the poor girls who end up in institutions that offer charity but strip them of autonomy. Her recovery is conditional on patronage and money, a system that absolutely persists today.
And we can connect JC's relentless demands for academic excellence directly to the gendered expectations of professional success women face now.
Esther's fig tree problem, that paralysis of choice, it hasn't been solved. It's just been intensified.
Right. The modern elite world demands the hyper-qualified person. JC asking for 5 languages is the 1950s version of today's endless unpaid internships, multiple advanced degrees, and constant self-promotion on social media.
It all leads to the same state of exhaustion and inadequacy Esther felt.
And the domestic pressure hasn't gone away. It's metastasized.
It really has. The conflict in the 50s was wife or career. That binary is gone, but it's been replaced by an impossible triple constraint.
Now it's wife and hyper-career and perfect mother.
A superhuman combination that makes Esther's original paralysis look almost quaint. The pressure cooker is just exponentially hotter now.
Finally, let's touch on the stigma of treatment and diagnosis. This is such a critical, lasting implication.
Esther is constantly trying to shed her identity and her history. She creates the persona of simple Ellie Higginbottom, the orphan, from Chicago.
Hoping to find acceptance for her sweet, quiet nature somewhere no one knows her past.
And that desire reflects the modern impulse to flee a history of mental health struggles. The stigma functions like a permanent, invisible scar.
And the social system, represented by Buddy Willard, makes sure that scar stays visible. Even after her recovery seems certain, he asks her that chilling question.
I wonder who you'll marry now, Esther, now you've been here.
That casual judgment shows that the experience is seen by the system as a permanent flaw, a taint, something that lowers her value in the marriage market.
And you see her trying to regain control by cutting ties. When she calls Irwin to end things and settle the medical bill, she tells him never and hangs up. She feels unaccountably weak-kneed and relieved.
That act of closure is an essential step in rebuilding her identity, free from the people who only see her through their own limited, judgmental lens.
So to bring this all full circle, let's situate the bell jar within our broader framework. The novel is a stunning illustration of systems versus individual pathology.
It fundamentally argues that a breakdown is often a rational, even inevitable response to an irrational, hyper-constricting social system.
Exactly. Esther's descent begins not when she goes insane, but when she starts seeing the world the way it truly is.
Yeah.
That warped view starts to seem like the one right way of looking at things.
Her illness is an inability to keep performing the required societal deception.
And what do institutions do when they're faced with that? They systematically frame deviance as pathology.
The system doesn't want to understand the failures that cause the crisis. It wants immediate conformity and quick, silent reintegration.
You see it with the stream of visitors she gets, her mother, the minister. They all measure her against what they wanted me to be. They leave utterly confounded because She doesn't fit the narrative of the repentant patient who just wants to go back to world life.
Her mother's reaction is so illustrative of that systemic gaslighting. She begs Esther to tell her what she did wrong. She says the doctors were asking about her toilet training.
Right. This fixation on a microscopic individual biographical flaw, a parenting decision, completely distracts from the massive societal pressures that actually trigger the crisis.
The career demands, the purity rules, the domestic expectations.
And we can track precisely how social norms directly shape mental health outcomes. The bell jar descends exactly when Esther rejects her assigned role.
Failing the internship, refusing to marry Buddy, not wanting to learn shorthand.
And her attempts to escape those norms, drinking vodka, seeking anonymous sex, are immediately read by the system as further evidence of her pathology. The system punishes any attempt to gain real autonomy.
When you lay it all out like that, the bell jar really is a terrifyingly precise map. It shows how the intersection of rigid gender roles, professional exhaustion, and flawed psychiatric institutions can trap an individual.
It makes suicide or self-harm, the ultimate act of autonomy, seem like the only rational choice left within that closed system.
And as Esther moves toward recovery, the novel gives us this cold, stark reminder of the alternative.
Joan's funeral.
Yeah.
The tombstones rising from the snow like smokeless chimneys. She sees the grave being prepared, this black, 6-foot-deep gap hacked in the hard ground.
It's a reminder that death is the ultimate final conformity the system offers.
And in the novel's final moments, Esther is preparing for her discharge interview. She's wearing a flamboyant red wool suit.
A costume for her reentry. She sees herself as born, twice patched, retreaded, and approved for the road.
But that recovery, that approval, it's profoundly fragile. It's conditional. She remains uncertain. She reflects. How did I know that someday the bell jar, with its stifling distortions, wouldn't descend again?
The system hasn't changed.
Not at all. It has only patched her up enough for re-entry, not fundamentally altered the conditions that caused her collapse. She is simply better equipped, for now, to live under the bell jar.
Which raises our final provocative thought for you to consider. The novel shows that women often had to seek out the means of their own physical and emotional autonomy, like that secret birth control fitting paid for with Philomena Guiney's money in secret at great risk or at great expense.
So the question is, if the prerequisite for a woman's fundamental freedom and self-determination is still the ability to pay for the means of her own escape, how deeply have we truly dismantled the original oppressive system Esther Greenwood fought?
We've been exploring the systems illuminated by Sylvia Plath's novel, The Bell Jar. If you found these ideas valuable, we encourage you to read the book yourself, support the author, or check your local library for free access. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.